Welcome and welcome back. In this week's video, we're going to talk to you about a piece of setting up your swing stance, the depth, or what it should look like.
Sure.
Yeah, and why? Why would we even do that? Without further ado, let's get into it.
Why?
Well, because I think people need to know that everybody's different and we should all have a swing stance and know where it is, right?
I think that's true. In certain coaching circles, there is a particular swing that's advocated. There's a conception that every swing, well, let's go ahead and show what a lot of people think a kettlebell swing needs to look like. So it's going to be a very deep hinge, so you're all the way back parallel to the floor, okay? Neutral, right out here. A lot of people want to see him way down here. They think that this back flat is better. The farther back the hips, the deeper the back, arms all the way up. Now, luckily, he can pull this off. He has this body type. I don't, and a lot of other people don't. So the point of this video is when you get somebody saying this is how your swing should look, you have the option of having a conversation with him. You could say, actually, no, that's not how my swing should look. This is uncomfortable. Or you can maybe take some fine tuning and some adjustments because there is some variability in these things. The important part to remember is we need different swings for different people because people are built different ways. So stand next to me. So you can see he's about 8 inches taller. I'm about 14 inches wider. My mass is here. His mass is there.
Yeah.
We're not going to fold. We're not going to interact with gravity the same way. I'm top heavy. He's bottom heavy. So it makes him really easy. It makes it really easy for him to get in this really deep hinge position, whereas I can't do that. If my torso comes too far forward of my midfoot, which is going to be something that will have to happen because I don't have very long legs to shift back too far. So this is about my maximum depth here. And unless I'm holding on to something, you can already see I'm tipping over. So I can't get farther than this. And if I bring my back here, I don't know if you can see this in the video, but my heels are starting to come off the ground. There's too much weight coming forward of my midfoot. This is where I'm comfortable. This is about my max depth. So when I get some joker coming in here telling me, oh, you got to swing like that, I now know, well, you should be throat punched because
Whoa.
I've done this drill and you're telling me dumb things that are not true. So
Right.
We need to understand different bodies need different swings. That's what we're going to cover today.
Okay, before we get into the actual drill, what are some of the parts we want to consider and why we want to consider those things?
The first thing we need to look at is gravity. Always consider gravity first. It is going to influence everything you do from the beginning of the movement to the end of the movement. So you have to consider that. When we're looking at the definition of balance, balance is keeping your center of mass over your base of support. And when your center of mass is closer to the center of your base of support, you are better balanced. So right now, his feet are going to be his base of support. He wants to stay toward the center of his feet. Now, generally we want to forget about the toes because they're not really meant for weight bearing per se. We're going to think more about the midfoot. So we want to examine this line of gravity, okay, where gravity comes down and strikes his body. We want to make sure that it's going to impact him and everything's going to fold right around that midfoot. That's the line that we're really interested in. If he is coming forward onto his toes, if he's going back into his heels, he's not very well balanced. So the first thing we want to think about is the foot in a place where it can support you folding with gravity, with the momentum of the kettlebell? Are you going to be safe and balanced? If you are not, your power output will drop. There will be wasted motion. So we're going to keep our eye on that midfoot. Okay, we want the weight there. So if you do a setup, for example, and you're trying to go, let's say, too far back, like I was. So if he's going back, this is as far as he can go back. If someone wants him back here,
Ooh.
You can see that toe is lifting. Those toes are lifting. He's no longer over the middle of his foot. We know we can eliminate that. Like that's not right. He has to come forward because he is not balanced.
Right, and that was like a total trust move too. Like I let myself fall. That was like,
Oh, that's beautiful.
perfect.
All right, let's talk more about this. So we also need to consider the rest of the body in reference to these points. I want to look at the chest or the center of the shoulder blades. Now you can look at the shoulder, and that's a really cool thing to do in a deadlift, for example, when you're evaluating your setup. The problem with that though is the arm is in a different place. Some people are going to be really trappy. They're going to have big shoulders. So some of this stuff is not going to be as meaningful as the bones here. And what you'll notice is if this comes too far forward over the feet, he's going to start to move forward. So we want to make sure that this point right about here is going to stay behind his toes or even with his toes. These are pretty fair markers. I've never seen anybody with this back, with this too far back. Now, and stay balanced. If he had a longer torso, okay, so if his torso were here, let's say the length of his head, you can see if that falls down, he's not going to be able to stay balanced here. Now, granted, if he were that big, he would have longer legs and he'd be able to get back, but the point still holds that as soon as this big mass gets over the toes, you're again not going to be balanced. So we've got 2 balance points that we're looking for, okay? Now, another thing we always want to consider is arm to body contact. Now, we're going to do this 2 ways. We're going to do it with a 2-arm swing and a 1-arm swing, but we're looking for some contact between usually the bicep, the tricep, somewhere in there, the rib cage. And when he goes all the way back into the position, there's going to be some contact between the forearm and the inner thigh. That's where most people are going to line up. There could be some variation depending upon how long your arms are, but you're looking to make sure that you have this connection here and this connection here. So now we're starting to build, this is almost a process of elimination. If all of these points are lined up and everything, you can check all these boxes, this is going to be your swing setup. So we've got the balance over the middle of the foot. We're making sure the chest isn't coming forward over the toes. Those are big balance things. We've got our arms connected to our body. That's your power transfer. So we want to make sure that those arms are connected. Now, something interesting to look at, go ahead and get as far back as you can with your 2-arm swing. So you can see his fingers here, I hope, otherwise this looks really weird on video. Remove one of your arms, and now do what would be a 1-arm. Do you go back anymore?
No, I mean, I can. I have a little bit more, but I'd start.
But not much. Now, when I do my 2-arm swing, this is as far as I can go. So the angle of my arm, okay, there's a little triangle here, right? This is set by my pec. I can go around it, but that's a little uncomfortable. Either way, the dimensions of my rib cage are going to limit how far I can squeeze my arm. If I had a narrower rib cage, I could keep everything here. If this doesn't look comfortable, it's because it's not. So this is as narrow as I can be. So this triangle needs to fit into this triangle. I don't have terrifically wide legs, so this triangle is actually going to be a little narrower. So I can only go back so far. So I want to make sure the arm is in contact with the body. Forget about how far you think you're reaching. If you lose that contact, you're not going to transfer power. So for me, even though maybe my structure would allow me, my legs would allow me to go back a little bit more, I'm limited with just the meat that's in the way, okay? So we've got our arm to body contact. What else do we need to think about? We've got to think about neutral spine, okay? Neutral spine is a myth, it's not a thing. If it's neutral, I don't know when it's going to be neutral or why it's going to be neutral. It's not going to be neutral during a swing, but we can look at his integrity. Does this piece here generally look like it's over this piece here? Does he have tension here? So if you go back into your swing setup and you have this really hard arch, I don't like this. This is not strong. This is not connected. Further, he may be, go ahead and do a normal swing, okay? Try to reach back more as far as you can, So you start to see some flexion here. So these two pieces are not maintaining their integrity. So this is another checkpoint that we can use to say, wait a second, are you doing some shenanigans here to get more depth? After this, we need to think about the level of the knees, the hips, and the shoulders. So we want the hips to be above the knees, okay? And we want the shoulders to be above the hips. If the hips are lower than the knees, okay, we have a squat, or what looks like a squat. We've eliminated the ability of his hips to contribute to the movement until much later. So he has to power through his knees first, and he can't really get his hips into it. We're limiting our power. If we're going down here and his shoulders are actually above his hips, he's got to use his back. He's got to use his back or his quads. Just straighten up here. Okay, he's got to do something to start to rise. He's not going to be able to have access to those hips. So either of these 2 points, if they're off, if the hips are either above the shoulders or lower than the knees, we're compromising their ability to move. So quick review on all of these points. We're looking at the balance over the midfoot. We're looking at the torso not being forward of the toes. Make sure he's balanced there. We're looking at our arm to body contact. Can he maintain it? Then we're looking at a nice connection between the rib cage and the hip. And then we're checking to see, are his shoulders over his hips and are his hips over his knees?
Now that we've set up the parts and the why we're doing these, let's go ahead and get into the drill and what that looks like for you at home. So what do we need?
We need a kettlebell.
Got one.
Technically, you don't need a kettlebell. You need something to anchor, a rope, a towel. We've got this handy dandy band here. What we're really looking to do is create the line, the approximate line that the kettlebell is going to make. This is not going to be perfect in terms of the line. You can, if you want to elevate it on a box. I've played with different variations where I've actually brought the kettlebell up to the appropriate level, but go ahead and drop that for a second. What we're looking to do is we're looking to bring the bell up to a place where he's going to be at the extreme, the most extreme range during the swing, which is going to be right here. This is where, other than the hike, but we're assuming the hike is already underway. We're assuming that the most extreme range is going to be the most challenging. So that's where we want to work from here. We want to know what our maximum depth is, and we want to function in the extreme, because as he's coming up here, all the rest is timing. The setup becomes a lot less relevant at this phase. The critical the critical step where the setup is important is at the bottom. So the band is really just meant, or the towel, whatever you use, is meant to replicate the line of the kettlebell. So let's pretend you're swinging and that kettlebell is just stopped. Okay, we've got a
freeze.
Yeah, we got
a. What was that Sandler movie that did that? Where you can pause.
I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, you got one of those remotes.
Not
so
good.
He's stuck. He's stuck at the very bottom of that swing. So the line is really meant to replicate that phase, and we want something where we can manipulate and pull and move forward and move back. So you're going to get the setup here. It's easier to turn the handle rather than having it parallel to you. Turn it to the side. And he's going to just grasp the straps. It needs to be long enough to where he can get into that position. And that's it. So he's going to walk forward. Now, a little note, we're not going over stance width. That's going to be another video entirely. There's a lot that we could unpack, and I think the length of this video is already testing people's patience and attention.
If you made it this far.
So what we're looking to do then is find a spot. First, let's get the feet. Do you feel balanced over your feet?
I do.
Okay. Is your chest too far forward?
No.
Okay. Can you slide back at all?
A little bit.
Okay. So let's go ahead and take the tension out of that. So go ahead and come forward.
Okay.
There we go. Or take the slack out of it, rather. Okay. Or put some slack in it. I don't know.
Put your back into it.
Anyway, so we've got the weight over the midfoot. We've got the chest. We've got the chest in a space where it's not too far over the toes. Let's go ahead and there we go. So I've got this connection here, and his setup has not fundamentally changed. We have shoulders over hips, hips over knees. I'm good with this. Now, there's a little bit of discretion, which we're going to get to in the next part. But for right now, just to recap, we've got the weight over the midfoot. The bulky part of his torso is not forward of his toes. We've got a good connection here. We've got shoulders over hips, hips over knees. We're good to go. Does that feel comfortable-ish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, we want to talk about actually being comfortable and making the necessary adjustments in that position. It's not about just grabbing and going. You want to be right. So the goal of this is to find your right setup. So that's what we're going to try and attempt to explain right now. So
let's
get back into it.
Yeah, let's get back into it. what we're going to find is there's going to be a little bit of discretion. There's going to be a little bit of ability to, he can still bend the knees a bit. He can still bend the knees a bit and still keep the shoulders over hips, hips over knees. He can perhaps even shift back a little bit more. And we'll talk about in a sec why that's going to be good. But so we've got some discretionary movement. Now, does this feel comfortable?
Yeah, I feel like I could swing here pretty good.
Okay, let's go ahead and straighten the knees a little bit. Let's come up a little more. Does that still feel comfortable?
Yeah, it still feels comfortable. I might feel like I have more power here, but it still feels comfortable.
These are things we're paying attention to. He's going to have more power here, and in fact, he will. We'll get into that in a second. So in this position, you can do a little bit of a rock. Okay, you can do a little bit of a rock and kind of feel out where you're going to be more comfortable. Can you bring the hips back a little more? Can you bend the knees more? Can you straighten them? These are the points where you're gonna dial in what's comfortable for you. Your swing form may change over time, but right now we're looking for comfort. And I would rather, maybe your biological ability.
I'm starting to get uncomfortable in that hole.
So maybe your biological ability, meaning just the structure of your skeleton, will allow you to maybe go to more depth, but you're not there yet. There could be some soft tissue restrictions that will clear up over time. You'll get more comfortable in this position. So right now we're looking for comfort. So what I'm going to have someone do at this point is get back into that setup and spend some time there, okay? As Jeremiah just said, it can get uncomfortable. We're going to do some breathing. I want you to really check in. I want you to do a little bit of shifting forward and back so you can really feel the weight over the center of your feet, feel the right position, and then just get really comfortable there. So we've got our setup, okay? We got all our points. We've got our arm to body contact, okay? There we go. Now I just want a little bit of shifting forward and back to see if you can do, or if you're in fact in the right spot. Okay?
Yeah, because if I go back too far, my toes start to come up.
Okay, perfect.
If I come here, I can actually maybe scoot a little bit.
There we go. So if you're comfortable here, spend some time. Really get those arms against the body as much as you can. There we go. We got good connection here. And don't be afraid to come in and kind of interrogate this position. So I want more balance.
Okay.
He shoved over too easy. So we want to get him nice and comfortable here. There we go. So just spend a couple breaths there. So now he understands where he ought to be. You may want to adjust for your goal. Now, the farther back your hips go, the farther they have to travel to come back to vertical. So if this is vertical and your hips are here, obviously if your hips are here versus here, the second one is going to allow you more distance. That greater distance is going to allow more time over which you can accelerate. So assuming that your power output does not drop, hips starting back farther is going to provide you more horizontal force that is going to translate into a more powerful swing. So this is a decision that you'll want to make if your goal is horizontal power. It may be that you as a coach have decided, I understand my athlete can get in this position, but I actually want to see her stay a little more vertical and create power in a slightly different way. Then that's maybe a little more quad dominant. So that the coach may make a decision to not go back as far. But from just a very basic physics standpoint, the hips getting back as far as they can is going to allow more room to accelerate. So you should be, if we're looking at swings only, you should get a more powerful swing by your hips moving back. So you want to take up all of that space if that's your goal. Another thing to consider, your cleans and your snatches. Now, the swing has a sole horizontal output. The bell is going to rise vertically because it's rising from here to here. So that is vertical, but the predominant engine, the thing driving it, is going to be that way. It's going to be horizontal. But if you're doing a clean, the bell's not going to end up here. It's going to end up there. So do you want to create as much horizontal force as possible? Maybe not. You may not be able to handle it. Maybe you're doing maybe you're doing some endurance type stuff and you don't want to just crush every single one, then maybe you don't want to get as far down. Maybe you'll use a little more quad, because there's going to be more of a vertical trajectory with the clean than there is with the swing. This is a point where we differ with on some coaches. A lot of coaches think your setup should look the same for all 3 skills. We just don't agree with that. 3 different goals should have 3 different setups. Sometimes some people that may work for, but for a lot of people it will not. The snatch as well. Okay, if you're using this to try your basic setup, there's a lot more vertical power in the snatch than there is in the swing. Obviously, there's more vertical force, so he may not want to use as much hip. So you're going to adjust to the goal, whether it's going to be tailoring it to an athlete, a specific situation, a physical limitation. It could just be that, when I set up like this, it feels shitty, and when I set up like this, it doesn't, and that's perfectly okay. But we're also evaluating the movement destination of the bell. And if you need a lot of vertical motion, you may not want to have a horizontal setup because you're, in a sense, competing against yourself. However, sometimes you may need it. These are decisions that you're going to need to make.
Yeah, and at the very least, you've got a framework to kind of establish what your setup's going to be. It's not going to change having those checkpoints, the base of support, the arm to body contact, watching where your chest falls, either above or behind too far. And ultimately, you are still going to have shoulders over hips, over knees.
Yep, that's not going to change.
That never changes. So use these, try and find your right stance. And if you have any questions or you want feedback on your stance, please be sure to comment or hit us up on the social media sites. We're happy to help. Anything else?
One thing.
Oh, shit. Okay, here we go.
Try this with your 2-arm setup and your 1-arm setup. It didn't alter much with Jeremiah. For me, it alters significantly. So try it with. So here's my 2-arm. Okay, my arms get in the way, and here's my 1-arm.
Yeah, it gets back a little bit further.
So I know what to look for when I'm reviewing video. When someone's trying to coach me to get deeper in a 2-arm swing, again, the throat punch. I know I can't get there unless I get smaller, which I probably won't.
Not per se.
But I know my 1-arm swing is going to be different. So do both. Do the setup for both because you may get different results. And that's all I got.
Excellent. Perfect. And again, as always, stay
in school
and strong.